As referenced by one of my recent community posts, I've been working on a screenplay recently. People who know me personally might find that funny, as I once stated very clearly a while ago that I would never write another screenplay. But here I am. There are a few reasons why I dislike writing screenplays in general, and I'll get to them, but this video is mainly focused on how to situate yourself within those differences. Screenwriting and other story writing formats are surprisingly different camps. Writers who have spent their time in only one of those camps might not realize how different they can be when you get into it. The first and most fundamental difference between the two is that the screenplay is not the finished product. Back in university, I took a screenwriting class, and I swear, this is what tripped half the room all semester. You see, story planning generally follows an order of operations. You design your characters, you design your world, you organize your plot, you make tons of notes, and then you start putting them together into the story itself. However, to the short story, novella, novel, or anything like that, you're editing and preparing the final product. The stylistic choices, the prose, and everything like that is a part of reading stories, so writers put a lot of effort there. For the screenplay, things are different. Screenplays can be read, of course, but that's not their actual purpose. Screenplays exist so that directors know what to make. As such, even though some people in the world of screenwriting gush about how artistic they make their screenplays, stylizing that much can actually be a hindrance. The screenplay format itself is so that directors, producers, and actors can flip through it at speed and still understand the story. If you fill the screenplay with long, flowing sentences full of creative adjectives and try to build suspense and mystery for the reader, then that's not going to function very well as a screenplay. Rather, the screenplay must be efficient in telling the story so that the final product, whether a movie, episode, commercial, or play, can be made. The story has to amaze the audience, not the production staff. The screenplay's rather utilitarian purpose results in the format we've all seen. A lot of screenwriters do their own variations, but there are a lot of things that need to be kept consistent with this form. Again, production crews have to flip through these to get information in as convenient of a way as possible, and they will be accustomed to reading them a certain way. Hand them something that's completely of your own design, and you will completely slow down the process. In fact, the movie probably wouldn't even be accepted for production. The first person who reads the first page is just going to trash the screenplay then and there. So, what are the general rules? Well, common practice puts a fade in on the top right of the first reel page, and transitions are on the right too. New scenes are in all caps on their own line, which include if it's interior or exterior, where it is, and when it is. If you number your scenes, it goes in this line too. Page numbers go in the top right. Characters' names are fully capitalized the first time they appear in narration. Paragraphs are not indented and should also be short. Do not fill the entire page with massive paragraphs. I'll explain why in a minute. Dialogue starts with the name in caps and the actual dialogue below it, left hand justified but indented to be in the middle of the page. Between the name and the dialogue, a parenthetical can be included, but it needs to be as short as possible. The courier typeface is traditional. Does this seem hard to do? Well, it can be, unless you have screenwriting software. Final Draft is the one people usually talk about, but that price is absurd, especially if you're just curious about screenwriting or you're a freelancer. Plus, it doesn't run on Linux, which is an immediate deal breaker for me. Instead, I recommend Trelby. It works like Final Draft, it can even export files to Final Draft, but it's free and open source. The point is, software like this does most of the work for you, and it makes screenwriting a lot easier because you're not constantly fighting with formatting. The reason you don't want to fill the pages with narration is because one page on a screenplay is supposed to be loosely 1 minute of screen time. There are exceptions, of course, but that's the gist of what you need to aim for. Long paragraphs can make time slow down. One of the biggest key differences between screenwriting and other writing is budget. You see, I can sit down and write some really crazy science fiction narrative with all sorts of intricate details and whatnot about characters traveling through space, visiting alien worlds, and seeing things that don't exist on our real Earth. I could then publish it as a novel, and it can be printed or uploaded online with no real difference in process than if it was a slice of life about an accountant named Brad. However, a screenplay that is a slice of life about an accountant named Brad is way cheaper than the science fiction I described. Books are words on a page. It's a description to inspire and lead the imagination to do all of the effects work. A filmmaker looking at a screenplay has to decide whether or not the story is affordable to them. Special effects are expensive. Stunt professionals are expensive. Insurance is expensive. Sets are expensive. Equipment is expensive. Actors are expensive. And so on. You can still technically write whatever you want, but most studios aren't going to be interested in picking up a super high budget story from a new writer. You have to build that trust before they will take that gamble for you. The good news is, constraints like that can end up leading to better storytelling because the story can't rely on millions of dollars to fill in any gaps. I recommend practicing by writing zero-budget screenplays. While no movie can ever actually cost $0, the idea is to practice by writing short screenplays that use things you own as props and people you know as actors. You'd never submit these practice screenplays, but if you get used to writing them, you will find that screenplays with more normal budgets won't be too concerning. The story should be able to function without all of the other stuff involved in the final production. That way, everything else also gets to shine in their own light instead of stuck filling in the story's gaps. Another thing to consider is that screenwriters are not necessarily directors. While some directors do their own screenwriting as well, I can't exactly recommend that practice. I mean, Zack Snyder isn't exactly going to listen to the advice of an animated fox with barely 300 subscribers, but Rebel Moon is exactly why the jobs of director and screenwriter are traditionally separate. Good directors have distinctive styles in how they choose shots and build the settings. The same screenplay can be handed to 5 directors and will net 5 unique movies, even if they all have the same characters and dialogue. The problem is a very human one. We know what we do well, and don't know what we don't do well. Snyder is good at a lot of things, but he notoriously struggles with plotting. Rebel Moon is visually good in my opinion, but an experienced screenwriter would be a great asset for him, because they could do the plotting and character development while Snyder can do the cinematography. I'd place Taika Waititi in a very similar situation. I think directors are overworking themselves when they feel like they need to do every part of the creative process on their own. I bring all of that up because it's a much easier example to see of something else that works in a very similar manner. Screenplays don't have a lot of directing in them. Directors will put their notes in later drafts of a screenplay for production, but an initial draft written for directors to familiarize themselves with a story shouldn't micromanage what the director's job covers. If you're a screenwriter and not a director, avoid putting things like specific camera shots in the screenplay. The director will do their job and handle it. I know I haven't really discussed how much of this is different from books, but I am under the assumption that the differences here are mostly self-evident. Books don't have directors, actors, producers, or anything else like that. They have an author, an editor who might also be the agent, if not an editor and an agent, and eventually a publisher. Most of the process is on the shoulders of the author as they work with the guidance of the editor. The author is behind the story and the details around it. Ultimately, that is why I prefer creating written media. I find it a lot more fun to develop my stories from the ground up without needing to worry about budgets or making room for the other jobs involved with producing a screenplay into other media. It is more freeing. That being said, I am writing a screenplay again. The reason is because I've come to accept that writing low-budget screenplays is one of the strongest exercises you can do when practicing story writing. Constraints can be annoying, but they force you to do better. And with that, keep writing.